What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you another week of what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined, as always, by my co-host, Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, did you enjoy Donda this weekend?
So fire, bro. So fire.
Is that coming?
I don't know, man. Mike Dean doesn't seem to be having too much fun making the album now. Claims he's still working on it though, but seems to be lashing out.
Yeah.
No. I'm once again living in his historical event, and I wish that event was a Kanye album and not something else. But here we are.
Yeah. Ugh, man, I just wanted to drop the album, but I assume we'll probably get it sometime in September on like a Wednesday at this point, like just whenever.
I believe the new temporary date is Friday. This Friday, the 20th or whatever that is, 21st. Sure.
Cut that audio clip and just replay it every week until who knows when. But yeah, if you want to follow us, hit that subscribe on youtube.com/nostalgiapod or visit soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to listen to the podcast any way you want. And Dave, you can also search our Nostalgia Best of 2021 on Spotify, where we keep all of our favorite songs from our favorite projects of the year. We're not going to have anything from Don on it yet, obviously, but we might be adding something from Red Velvet on there, dropping their 6th mini album. I don't know how many official releases this is for them, with like feature length, but another K-pop group, as we're kind of wading into that water and learning more about these bands, just dropped today. What'd you think of their most recent project?
Yeah, Queendom, the 6th mini album, as you said, from Red Velvet. I counted up, they have 10 EPs slash mini albums. Not sure why it's the 6th one. Couldn't really figure out that the delineation there. And then they have 2 feature length albums. So there's a lot of music out there from Red Velvet. And I listened to some of the hits, but I wasn't super familiar with the group beyond just knowing who they were. And yeah, Queendom, as a mini album nomenclature might suggest, short, 6 tracks, 19 minutes. And I thought it was pretty good. Learning more about the group, they're like really lauded for their versatility in terms of different types of songs, different types of song production specifically. And I don't know if I got like that like stark versatility on this Queendom EP. It kind of sounded all kind of similar, but it sounded pretty good. What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought actually like the beginning and where it ended up did sound drastically different, but it all kind of sounded within the same vein of like K-pop. Like nothing necessarily felt like new or adventurous in that sense, but it's actually interesting because I feel like a lot of the K-pop albums we've reviewed this year, I've really enjoyed when it's more like upbeat, like clubby, real like festival type banger sound. I thought they I thought I enjoyed this more when they were a little bit more like toned back. Like the last track, Hello Sunset, I thought was just like a really nice track. And I don't know if maybe that's just where my headspace was at, like looking for something that was a little bit more like downbeat. But I actually found that to be when I felt like they meshed together the best. Something like Pose, which felt really all over the place to me. I think was a bit off-putting because they were going for that clubbiness or that like stadium type sound, and I just did not feel like it really all worked there. But some of the more like toned back tracks I thought were a lot smoother. Did you have that same feel?
Yeah, yeah. I'm always a sucker for the harmony when they
Mm,
sing together, and like on I think Better Be
yeah.
in the middle, you get that really nice that like harmony breakdown on the chorus. Thought that sounded great.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, like I've been latching on to lots of like the bangers that have come out on the K-pop stuff we've been listening to this year. And I guess the banger from this would be the title track Queendom, which got the music video out today. And I like that one. The drums, the pulsing chorus, it sounds good. But I think you're right. I think there's maybe more to grab from these specific album cuts instead. Like if you listen to their hits, like ice cream cake. So much different from this very like electro pop
Mhm.
production, I guess shades of like BTS, Mic Drop with Steve Aoki, or like their probably their most lauded song, Red Flavor, one of their most listened to songs. Uh, Production's like really, really wild, you know. But on Queendom, yeah, I think you're right.
Mhm.
Like the middle tracks and the way it kind of fades out, it's not like it's soft spoken or anything, but it's just more like it's primarily singing. Like Irene, their leader, is does all the rapping, but I feel like the rapping was like in fits and starts. Like it was like really nice flow, but it was still primarily like singing first to me on this, which I feel like a lot of the K-pop stuff, especially the bangers we listen to, it's often like 50-50 K-pop and singing. But I didn't feel that so
Yeah.
much on this.
Yeah, I completely agree with uh, your assessment there. I think um, this these 6 songs, for whatever reason, were a bit different, a bit more, singing. I think you nailed it when you said that the harmonies really just popped for me, and I think hearing some really beautiful tracks, maybe not the most like it's not gonna like take down a stadium like I said before, but it's still something that I think can build out that catalog around some of those bigger hits. Um, yeah, I mean, we hadn't talked about a K-pop album for a while. I feel like it's been like maybe over a month since our last review of
Hmm.
a K-pop project. So nice to have this as a big drop back in our lives on a Monday here. I also appreciate that Monday drops. Very
Yeah,
good.
yeah. That's for sure. Yeah, we talked about a lot of SM stuff, right? NCT Dream, EXO, Shiny comeback. And this, of course, whenever they message anything with K-pop, it's like the Red Velvet comeback, and it's like, well, their last EP as a group was at the end of 2019. It's hardly a comeback. Not to
Yeah.
mention the subunit of the group, Irene and Solgi, released their debut subunit EP in 2020. So it's like they're always here. Like I don't know why they always call it the comeback. The Red Velvet comeback is here. It's like they're not they didn't go anywhere. They're just making music. Like so funny.
If it gets people interested in buying the album, do what you gotta do is what I say. Dave, someone that didn't need a comeback was Brandon Flowers, who he's been working, man, and the Killers dropping their second album within a year. We talked last year about what was it? Chasing the Mirage. Is that
Floating the Mirage, baby.
imploding the Mirage? That's what it
It's
was.
gone. It's blown up.
Yeah, imploding the Mirage. And Dave, it's actually interesting. I'm looking at the picture behind you if you're watching youtube.com/nostalgia pod. Killer's looking old in that picture, man.
Mm,
And I it's kind of weird because I think about them, and obviously they're mid, that mid aughts, like 2005, 2006. I think actually Hot Fuss may have been '03. Now I'm thinking about it, but really like that middle of the zero zeros, they really
yeah.
started to pop. Hot Fuss, Sam's Town,
Hmm.
Day and Age, those sorts of albums. But yeah, they're old now. They're aging with us, and Imploding the Mirage, I think we were kind of like middling on, maybe a few interesting moments, but overall, the last couple have just been really disappointing albums. Did that trend continue for you on Pressure Machine?
Yeah, so I didn't like Wonderful, Wonderful. I didn't really like Employing the Mirage, though I liked it more than Wonderful, Wonderful. And I definitely like Pressure Machine more than those two.
Mhm.
I think quite clearly. It's just a more interesting album this time around. The concept album of the small town, Bryn Flowers going back to his roots in Utah. However superficially that might come across, it's still the premise of the album. And at least for me, it's like something to latch on to.
Mhm.
And I actually thought the songs were pretty solid. Most of them. I thought like early on, the first track, West Hills, that's a little long-winded, indulgent song. But after that, like I actually think it's pretty good. Like it's getting a lot of comps to like Bruce Springsteen homage, which has been a Killer's talking point for a while at this point.
Mhm.
Um, and you also have the constant voiceovers usually at the beginning or ends of the tracks from people in this town,
Nephew, yeah.
recorded by an NPR audio engineer. kind of
Hmm.
setting your stage, right? And like I think like almost half the songs have some kind of narration piece to it.
Hmm.
So I thought it was pretty interesting. Like, for especially for music that I'm not normally like super jazzed to get up in the morning for, but I actually uh, liked it, and it's also I think has a really interesting meta angle to it because this is a lot different than the more like anthemic arena rock that Employing the Mirage was supposed to be, right?
Hmm.
And the Killers notably recorded that album pre-pandemic and haven't yet toured that album, and now have made this new album that's starkly different. The comparison point is Taylor Swift here. Lover recorded pre-pandemic, much more poppy, not toured yet, and then followed up with Folklore and Evermore, which is completely different. You know,
Yeah.
kind of funny to see that parallel between the Killers and Taylor Swift of all groups.
I mean, it's definitely a interesting parallel, I suppose. I think Lover obviously a lot better than Imploding the Mirage, and check out that our Lover review and our Imploding the Mirage review. Um, in reading about this album and the preparation for it, I didn't know this beforehand, and maybe this is just an oversight on my part, but apparently before recording the last couple albums, Wonderful, Wonderful, Playing the Mirage, I think even a couple of the others before that, like Battleborn, like Brandon Flowers would go in with a idea in mind of what he wanted to come out with, but didn't have anything pre-written. Yeah, he would just go in there and write the songs as it's going. But this was the first album he's gone in with tracks written or songs already written out. And I think you really hear that in this album because like you said, I think this is probably his best lyrical album, probably since like Sam's Town, which is their second album. Um, but it just sounds like they had a concept that really worked. Whereas something like Wonderful, Wonderful, I think certainly has some tracks that probably stand out more than some of those like Sam's Town like deep cuts, like The Man, especially after Vice, and it was just played every single commercial for that, every single premiere. It's played for a lot of like sports things too. That song is probably going to be at the top of their catalog forever now. Unfortunately, I don't think it's one of their better songs, but it just kind of is what it is for Late Killers. But I think there's like 5 or 6 songs on here that are just way better and way more thought out. Like a song like Sleepwalker to me really stands out as like a nice mix of Flowers really tapping into that like Springsteen esque vibe, but then them totally nailing the like Killers stadium sound at near the end with the guitar solo, the drums kicking in. It just really intensifies, and you kind of hear something similar a couple of tracks later in the car outside, where it's very similar like song structure, but again like talking about uh like real world issues that are going on in this town, something that feels a little bit more relatable. Um, However, I do think the writing was hit or miss for me, right? So a track I've seen getting a lot of praise is "Desperate Things," right? And it's this song about a cop who kills his girlfriend's abusive boyfriend and runs off with her. Meanwhile, he has a wife and daughter of his own. It's like one of the few killer songs that goes on. It's like 5 or 6 minutes, and they have like
Yeah,
5 or 6 verses to it. I found it pretty cringy at points, but like it's kind of nice to see Brandon Flowers like breaking out of like the traditional like mold of his writing and like pushing himself a little bit. So even the things that didn't work, I think I give him some credit for it. Um, we only got one collaboration on this album with Phoebe Bridgers. How did you feel like that song worked? Runaway Horses.
uh, yeah, I liked it. It's good. Another one with narration to it. Phoebe was a guest on something else we talked about recently. Maybe it was uncredited. I don't remember. Um, she seems to play well with others. She's being tapped a lot as a guest for
Mhm.
rock stuff.
Yeah, I think she's definitely been anointed as that like queen of indie, and I think people really recognize her songwriting ability is strong, and she harmonizes so well. Something like I don't know. I'm trying to think of a track that stands out. My brain's falling short at the moment, but she just really is. Um, I think a good collaborator at this point. But what track stood out for you?
I think Quiet Town is pretty good. That one has the Bruce vibes going on. I like that one. I liked Cody, um, Runaway Horse, the on Pressure Machine, the trial track. I liked the like scratching of the production on like that was it like
Mm,
on the guitar, you know.
yep.
I think maybe to the purists that might sound like bad guitar work, but I don't know. I just thought it sounded cool. Um, yeah, I mean, I was just surprised to be pleasantly amused by a Killer's record, you know, because normally I'm just like, this is just droning on for me, and it's like, yes, like I'm not gonna like run this back anytime soon, but I actually think like the lyrics seem to be stepped up, even if, as you said, they're not like as you know, revelatory as some people are making them out to be. I think some
Sure.
people have some rose-colored glasses just because it's like, oh, the Killers, they're being somewhat interesting again. This is awesome, and it's like, oh yeah, so that's cool, but like, you know, let's still keep it a buck. It's not like the most amazing thing I've ever heard, but it's pretty good. So, but then again, like if you're a Killers fan, like I'm sure you're just gonna go stick to Hot Fuss and Sam's Town in like 2 weeks. You know, you're not gonna go back to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably Sam's Town is the unequivocal like gem of their discography. Hot Fuss I'll ride for all day, but Sam's Town just more consistent. I think conceptually better, but I think if we're gonna be getting Killers albums that are this focused and lyrically Flowers is pushing himself, it's a step in the right direction for a band that could have very easily just faded into playing the hits and stadium tours for the rest of their career, just doing the
Yeah.
festival circus. So I appreciate seeing that. But Dave, it's time to move on to some TV. And we each got to some shows that the other one didn't get to. I'm gonna start because Dave on FX just wrapped up this past weekend. And I guess it was this past Thursday, not this past weekend. And Dave is a show I've caught up on very recently. Is a show that had always been kind of on my radar, but I'd kind of chalked it up to being a Hulu show, which is funny because FX on Hulu, obviously having that partnership. I kind of just am like, it's a show on Hulu. Like if I ever put Hulu as a streaming service on my TV, maybe I'll get around to it. And I've made a point to catch up on some of the shows on there, like Rami, for example.
Wait, are you saying you don't have Hulu like hooked up?
No, I do, but like I just never open it as an app.
Oh
Like
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
always on Netflix, HBO, Disney Plus,
Mhm.
but
Yeah,
Hulu, I don't
Hulu.
know.
I'm only on Hulu when FX is bringing me to Hulu.
Yeah, exactly. And so as I've been trying to catch up on shows, Dave was one I finally got to, and I found this to be a really delightful show. The first season I think was a little more up and down for me, and I think seeing Lil Dicky and I'm not sure if this would be like an autobiographical telling of his come up, but there's definitely obviously a lot of true stories or things that are close to true that are told in this. Um, I think it's just like fascinating to see his perspective on like where he's at as a rapper. We haven't gotten a record from him in what like three going on 3 years now, maybe four. So it's it's been a while. Maybe it's only two. Maybe it was 2019, but
No, no,
feels longer.
it's been a while. The debut album is 2015. Yeah, and then he had one-off
Wow,
stuff
6 years.
yeah, then he had one-off stuff like Freaky Friday and Earth. And I did
Right.
technically was like the
Earth.
Earth EP, which was like the alter ego thing, but he hasn't released something under Little Dicky since 2015, full length
Right.
anyway.
And season two, I think really grapples with I think where he's at in terms of making an album, which is he's dealing with writer's block the whole time. Really an introspective season where he's grappling with his own insecurities, his own relationship issues, his own uh personality traits of using other people or taking and not giving back. And it's, and obviously it's couched with some really funny episodes and some really outlandish uh, themes. I mean, there's an episode here where he he does an interview with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and just like all the things that happen around that interview are just really, really hilarious and strange. Um, but what really impressed me about Dave, because you obviously, you get the dick jokes. If you know anything about Lil Dicky and his come up, you kind of have to go in expecting to be getting that. But season two really, I felt like leveled up in terms of like building out the characters around Dave really well, while also not losing the plot of Dave trying to make this record, trying to get over this writer's block, trying to find inspiration and what he wants to be as an artist. And like a character like Gata, who you get in the first season that he's dealing with bipolar, and I actually think that's handled fairly well on the show, and explained pretty clearly and accurately. Um, you really see like the pressures around him that contribute to like his manic episodes. You see how this like he's basically Dave's hype man on this show, and always kind of like trying to keep him positive, keep him moving forward, keep his ego up. And it wears on him because he feels like he's not getting anything from Dave as a friend. And Dave's whole management team in this season and in the show are his friends. Are his producer is a friend from childhood. His manager is a friend from his first like adult job. Gata is a person that he befriends before he ever like releases anything big. So there's a lot of like blurring of lines, and I think that's really like teased out well. And then there's just like the weirdness that I think you come to expect from Lil Dicky. There's an episode where he goes to work with Rick Rubin, and he goes to his like Rick Rubin's house, and he does one of those what's it called, like gravity pools or whatever, where they like take away
Uh,
all your senses and you're just floating.
Infinity Pool.
Yeah, infinity pool. And he's just floating in there, and like all these like visuals come, and he like faces himself, but himself in the future, and there's an aardvark or an anteater involved. It's it's really, really strange. But I think I think the payoff of this show, and seeing like the the way Dave evolves as a character is just really not what I expected from a show like this. I kind of thought it was just gonna be dick jokes, and it surpassed my expectations with that. Also, Dave and Allie, who's like the love interest in the first season, and like his girlfriend. I think the fact that they could actually get me to buy into a relationship with Lil Dicky is pretty impressive, because I would never like he's so self-centered in the show that to like want them to be together, to want to root for this couple is just really I think like an accomplishment of the show, because Dave is just kind of an asshole, like a self-centered piece of shit in this. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the look.
I appreciate that Taco from Odd Future is part of the cast on this show.
Hmm.
Uh, was it Taylor Bennett? Tyler Bennett? Whatever his first name is. Taco.
Yeah,
That's
I
cool.
think it's
Happy about that. Of course, Sid's brother.
mhm.
But yeah,
Oh yeah,
I've
the
wanted to give it
elves.
a
Oh, okay.
I've
Sorry.
wanted to give it a chance, but I'm having a hard time getting over Little Dicky of it all, because I've just really fallen off Little Dicky, because it's kind of clear that he just kind of like like what often seems to happen with white rappers. They use hip hop to further their overall career and then leave hip hop behind. Notice how he's not even going by Little Dicky anymore. Like the press for this show, he goes by his real name, Dave Bird. It's like, I don't know, like I've also just found like the music has gotten less interesting to me. Like I used to think he was really witty at times, like an album cut like Personality. So it's really funny quotables. But then like Freaky Friday, he seemed to, you know, the dick jokes, as you said, it seems to have come into the show as well. He's just not that intelligent anymore, at least on that level. And of course, I think the Earth song is dog shit. So it's like musically, I've just been so out on him because he's barely in on his own music career too.
Mhm.
And then everything's just like a big joke, and it's like I don't know. Like, I just wish he took his own stuff more seriously. Clearly, he's taking the show very seriously, but the fact that
Mhm.
his character is like the buffoon stuff like it was in real life, I don't know. It's a bit of a walk for me.
Yeah.
Um, so
Y-
I'm
You know,
I'm not super interested in him right now.
yeah, and I think that's fair. There was a point, especially I think it was maybe around like I don't know, episode 2 or 3 of this season. I'm pretty sure there's is it this season where he's like with Benny Blanco? So there Benny Blanco the producer plays a pretty big like role. It's like one of Dave's friends in the
There's a lot of
show.
big cameos in season 2, from what I know.
Yeah, there are a lot of big cameos. But like Benny Blanco is just like a running like side
Mhm.
character, right? And I think it's in season 2. There's like an episode where he's just like hanging out with him all day, and they are doing like really ridiculous, like homoerotic type stuff, which like to each their own, not a big deal. But like the way it's just portrayed in the show, just was like I don't know if this is handled the most tastefully. I don't know like if this is really like what I want to be consuming. But then you get like an episode, like I think just the next one is the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar episode. I'm like, this episode rules. Like this is great, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is great in it. He plays like he's as like a post basketball person is focused on his journalism career and is interviewing Dave. And there's always like this like undertone of is he going to write like a hit piece on Dave about him using black people and appropriating black culture, and it's like really funny and really well done, but it's just like the back and forth of it all was kind of tough. But yeah, then it's just like you need to just ride it out to like get the highs, and unfortunately there are some lows. But it also kind of reminds me of Rami, a show we haven't gotten a chance to talk about a lot, just in terms of there's some just
Mhm.
really cringy moments, dude, that like you just want to like hide your face and not watch and turn away from
Yeah.
TV. So it's not for everybody, but I think if you want to just like enjoy a show and not take it too seriously, this
Mm.
could be a good watch. So Dave, I use a lot of my time to watch Dave because I wasn't really that into the Bad Batch this season. But you finished it, whereas I didn't. So tell me, did the season finale, did the season of Bad Batch hit for you?
It did, but I'm also already in the bag for this kind of stuff. Star
Hmm.
Wars: The Bad Batch, effectively just the next season of Clone Wars. Tie-ins to Clone Wars, as you'd expect, because it's a chronological sequel. Tie-ins to Rebels, in a certain sense as well, of which this is a prequel. The Dave Filoni animated universe, this is just the latest entry. So I was already in on this. And I actually think, given Filoni's standards of season ones, this is towards the top because Clone Wars season one, famously, not very good. So I liked it a lot. I think there's important distinctions, which probably makes sense for why you would, and I'm sure others may have checked out, is that this is very much uh, appreciated best if you already know everything that's going on with these animated shows. And there's fan service that's more like there's fan service that just doesn't make any sense to someone who doesn't know these other characters and stuff. So it's really much for those people that have been on the journey. And I think that that journey is continues to be more rewarding when you're already in. But if you're just kind of picking this up for the first time, yeah, I mean, then it's gonna be how much mileage do you have for a children's cartoon? Because it's still a children's cartoon. So it really depends what you're looking for with this. If you're in on all the Star Wars mythos, there's still plenty here. But if you're not, then you know it's 8 hours that you might have find very up and down because there are episodes that are not super plot heavy. So it really depends what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's where I fell out of it was obviously not watching much of the animated series beforehand. I got through like 5 or 6 episodes, and I was hoping, similar to like the Marvel shows, and we talk about one in a second, that I was gonna get some like sort of Easter eggs, maybe some things pointing to like next steps in the Star Wars world. Um, and I just felt like I wasn't really getting enough of that, and it wasn't holding my attention as a show. Obviously, like you said, it's a show made for kids, so I think if you're not in on like you said, the characters already or some of the plots, or some of the callbacks. It just kind of felt like, it's a good show and not really for me. But what did you end up like? What did you end up being most impressed with or finding
Yeah.
most enjoyable about this season?
Yeah, so there are a lot of good callbacks. I would say episode 7 and 8. And this is a common thing with Rebels, Clone Wars, now the Bad Batch is like short arcs within the season, 2 or 3 episodes max kind of thing. This episode 7 and 8, Battle Scars and Reunion, it's a 2 episode arc, and I think that's clearly the high point of the season. That's when Captain Rex, of course, comes back into the fold as expected. He was not in the trailer or anything, but people assumed he would come back, of course, from the Clone Wars. And his like relationship and conversations with Hunter, I think really does color in more stuff in terms of like the early rebellion and just like things people are like interested in. And it's just cool to see Rex. I also think the animation for these 2 episodes when you go to Baraka is really stunning. When they touch down that planet, you see like the Star Destroyer graveyard. It's just really cool visuals. To immediately follow up that episode with Rex, he walks off into the mist and ends. The next episode, so when Crosshair finally comes back to attack them. And that's like obviously really good set pieces. But then it ends with a total surprise, which is Cad Bane, the bounty hunter, showing up for the first time on the Bad Batch, another staple of Clone Wars. And that like Old West dual gunslinger moment with Hunter is fucking sick. So I love seeing Cad Bane come. I love seeing Rex. So the Baraka stuff was really cool to me. And of course, that's another light cameo too, because Baraka was the subject of the Jedi Fallen Order video game, the first planet you go to there. So yeah, there's
Hmm.
lots of cool stuff. You see Saw in the first episode, as you said, Saw Gerrera, of course. Cham Syndulla shows up, and that's where you get young Hera from Rebels. That's probably the most like overt fan service because it's sidelining the Bad Batch while you have this episode about young Hera and her dad Cham and like how that's gonna go. And so if you hadn't watched Rebels, of which Hera is a central character, then you just have no idea what the fuck that is. You're like, oh, okay, these are other people the Bad Batch are meeting. So
Hmm.
it's like stuff like that sometimes where it's like overt, but other times where it's oh, Fennec shows up. Well, if you didn't watch The Mandalorian, that's just another bounty hunter to you. Or
Hmm.
the Martez sisters show up from Clone Wars season 7. Like some of the stuff is totally inoffensive. I thought the Hera stuff was like that's awesome for Rebels fans, but probably doesn't make any fucking sense to other people.
Yeah, doesn't land for anyone else,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah, I mean, so where does it leave off? Does it leave off like season two is definitely coming,
So,
or?
yeah, so they confirmed a season 2 right before the finale. And in terms of like plot and like Easter eggs and stuff, like there is, I think, key stuff at the end. Obviously, Camino gets fucking nuked basically by the Empire. Not a question people, as I said in the premiere, not a question people were overtly pondering. What happens to the cloners when the Empire decides we don't want any clones anymore? Turns out they fucking bombed the place,
Hmm.
and you see that happen. And honestly, it's really devastating. Like when they go back and you see the halls and stuff. It's like these silent scenes right before just this orbital bombardment. Really effective, honestly, especially if you had been with the clones throughout Clone Wars too. I thought that was a really good stuff and also a
Hmm.
fitting way to like put a nice stamp on season 1 as like a end note to then really have a branch off in new directions for season 2. So I thought that was really effective. Um, Also, one of the cloners is basically kidnapped by the Empire, and like the post-credits scene or pre-credits end scene, she's like basically now at this Imperial cloning facility, and she gets you know introduced to this unnamed like Imperial scientist figure, who of course has the same symbol on her tunic as Dr. Pershing did in The Mandalorian when they were,
Hmm.
trying to extract who knows what from Grogu's blood, as we know. So maybe some early Imperial cloning stuff to come. Snoke stuff, who the fuck knows, right? So I think that's like a cool Easter egg to ponder, and I'm sure it'll come up over time in season 2. But 2022 is actually going to be loaded for Star Wars stuff. You have Bad Batch season 2, The Mandalorian season 3, the Cassian Andor Rogue One spinoff Andor, as well as the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. For all 4 shows coming in 2022.
Which one are you most excited for?
Oh, that's tough.
Obi Wan. Come on,
It's
Ewan
got to be
McGregor.
Obi. It's got to be
Yeah.
Obi-Wan, but I'm actually quite excited for Andor the more I learn about it. Apparently, Forrest Whitaker is returning as Saw, which is cool.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Wow, we're gonna be talking about him in just a little bit in respect, but I've
and
liked most of what I've seen from him recently. So
and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we eventually encounter Cash and Andor in animated form on the Bad Batch. Plenty of room for more synergy.
mm,
For Lucasfilm, they know what they're doing on TV.
definitely exciting stuff. If you enjoy Star Wars, watch the Bad Batch, and if you enjoy Marvel, I think you're probably watching What If. What if you aren't? I don't know. Probably don't listen to this review, but uh, yeah, Marvel's What If premiered this past Wednesday. I enjoy I enjoy when we're getting these Marvel shows on Wednesdays now. It feels like a good day to drop. But regardless, What If is exploring the multiverse, exploring the these heroes, but if situations had gone differently, if they were perhaps switching roles or taking on other superhero powers. And in this first episode, we get the Captain Britain, right? That's what it's Captain Britain.
No, this would be Captain Carter. Captain Britain is
Captain
a different
Carter.
character.
Right, you're right. Sorry, Captain Carter. And if
Obviously,
she were the
Asian
first
Carter.
Avenger,
If she became the first Avenger, what if?
yes. And Peggy Carter, obviously Steve Rogers, love interest and friend, and uh, Agents of Shield kind of comes from her, but not directly because it's more in the future. But she's in the Marvel universe basically, and in this scenario, in this what if, she becomes Captain America basically, and Steve Rogers becomes Iron Man. Which sure, okay, but um, what if is it probably less interesting for the things that actually happen. I
Mm.
think more interesting for this felt like a low stakes show, some like a bit of filler for Marvel going in as just something to kind of bridge a gap in programming in a sense, just kind of have something to build out the catalog. And then we get news before that there will be consequential things to the overall arc of phase 4,
Yeah.
um, as we as these episodes play out. And I think you kind of see at the end of this first episode that Nick Fury in one of these multiverse timelines is seems to be getting people together in some way. So there's something going on there, but I know that you weren't super pumped for this, right?
Yeah, I wasn't. I wasn't. I think part of it's because it's animated, but that's
Mm.
not a barrier for me. Again, I love
You
the
talk
Star
about
Wars
Bad
animated
Batch.
shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just because like I am very skeptical of the consequential nature of Marvel's What If. We just went through this with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is like barely consequential, and that's live action featuring actors in the actual movies. You know,
Mhm.
they got a lot of talent returning for What If to do voiceover. Not everyone. Chris Evans, a big exception. Downey as well. So I just want to see it first. Like, I want to see what this consequence is because the nature of the multiverse is that you can do anything, but also that nothing actually needs to matter because you can just do anything and you can do whatever you want. In this case, Captain Carter, right? This was just a redux of Captain America 1, the film. And it was cool. I think the animation's beautiful, it's perfectly fun, but I don't think it's done anything to differentiate from other Marvel television animated series. Of course, this is a Marvel Studios television show, What If? But the Marvel television stuff is still existing in some form, right? We had a Modoc came out recently, starring Patton Oswalt. How is What If actually that different from Modoc, which I know people like, but it's like I feel like this is for Marvel super fans,
Yeah.
and like you got to really want to watch a Marvel cartoon, at least until I see something different.
Yeah. I think I'm bought into the Marvel shows at this point, and I like when they get weird. I do agree. I'm a little less captivated because it is animation, and obviously, like they had a lot of people coming back to reprise their roles doing voice work. but there are some notable people missing. First episode, Chris Evans is not voicing Steve Rogers. I believe Scarlett Johansson doesn't come back. I don't think Robert Downey Jr. comes back.
Mhm.
So a few the biggest people are like out on doing the voice work for this. But um, the fact that they got so many people back is interesting, and I think it's just fun to like be with these characters in a different way. I think one of the knocks on Steve Rogers is, he's kind of a boring character because he's just always making the right choices. And I think they obviously play that up in, Endgame and things like that. But it was interesting to see him as Iron Man, I think, just because it's like
Hmm.
obviously such a play on the you know rivalry he had with Iron Man with Tony Stark as they were, rivals or
And what
even
was
though
his
like
name in this? Hydra Buster or something like that?
yeah, Hydra Buster, which work on the name, I'd say, but
Powered by
um,
Howard Stark, of course.
yeah, but I think overall, I just kind of found this to be a good setup, but I don't know what like combination really I'm like hoping for. Like I don't know who I want to see doing what. And we think about the next episode, which is obviously I say obviously people may not know this. It's Chadwick Boseman, his last voice acting role,
Mhm.
reprising T'Challa as Star Lord T'Challa, which is like such a
Yeah.
weird combination. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
I
it,
kind of wish his last voice appearance was doing something else that I feel like I don't know, fucking mattered. I don't know. It's just I want to see this feel any different than all the other animated Marvel shows because all the other
mm,
animated Marvel shows don't get people up in the morning. They're animated Marvel shows for kids. And
yeah,
just because this one was made by Kevin Feige and crew doesn't necessarily change that. So I just need to see more.
yeah. We'll check back in with it a little later on in the season, maybe when it wraps up, if it's worth checking in on. Dave, we've gone through all this other TV, and I've just been waiting to talk about White Lotus with you, man. Like, just want to get back onto the beaches of Hawaii. Want to go scuba diving. Want to, get my room upgraded to the one with the drop pool in it. Like I just
God,
want what I
fucking
paid for.
pineapple sweet bitch.
We talked about White Lotus after the first episode. I think we were both really intrigued by the show. Really interested to see where it was going. Um, I think there's a bit of like a red herring in the first episode. It starts off with them loading the remains of a corpse onto the plane as they're flying out from this resort, and you're kind of like, oh, who dies? Like where's the murder? Where's the death come in here? And I think that kind of like hangs over the end of the show. But I found this show so much more fun and compelling to be with for so many reasons that weren't that almost felt like added bonus to it. But did you have the same experience? Did you enjoy White Lotus?
Oh yeah, I think White Lotus, unless you're in the bag for Mike White's stuff, and I wasn't. I didn't really know much of Mike White's work. I knew him as the guy in School of Rock. I didn't know he was this kind of niche filmmaker,
Mhm.
and I hadn't seen Enlightened, his last HBO show, so I didn't really know like what the Mike White ticks were. So watching White Lotus, I was just pleasantly surprised a lot about where it ended up going and what like themes mattered to the show. And I like that it's not a quote like satisfying conclusion in the traditional sense. And there are lots of things that will frustrate you. And I think that is the point. And it's
Yeah.
really well done. We know it's been renewed for a season 2 at HBO. It'll now
Mhm.
be an anthology format. Honestly, it's a great premise. They'll probably pick a new island, but Mike White conceived of the show as to be COVID friendly, where you can just make a production bubble at a real life resort and make the show
Mhm.
relatively risk free. Everything sounds perfect, honestly. But season 1 is really great, and I think as you mentioned, like the in media res of the dead body, it's basically dropped, right? Like there's no
Oh
like
yeah.
overlying tension of what that's about until they
Yeah.
have to finally kill somebody to satisfy it. So it's almost like a play on like other shows that have quite routinely introduced a dead body in episode 1 as like a tick, right? Like the dead girl in the beginning of Mayor of Easttown, for example, this year. But yeah, White Lotus, pleasant surprise because I wasn't really anticipating it.
I wasn't anticipating it either, and I am, echoing your praise and of like uh, of the ingenuity of making this show. Creating this bubble. They filmed all this in fall and winter of 2020, so this wasn't something that they had in the can and were just holding for. Like this was something that they just made, wanted to get out, and also, you know, the commentary, I think some subtle and some not so subtle on socio-political issues. Um, and just in term, but to do it in the way that they did in terms of like relationship dynamics and in terms of uh, characters making choices that you just would never expect when you first meet them. It really just really impressive. And you know, it's I think there's a lot of different relationships on the show that I just found myself like feeling so much tension in my stomach watching. I think the place I want to start with that is the relationship between Sydney Sweeney and Brittany O'Grady, who plays Paula. And
Right.
man, their dynamic, I felt like where it started, and they kind of in that first episode are like, oh, the bitchy teenagers who are just like judging everybody and fucking with like the older people, to
Hmm.
them being like this like epitome of like this like really toxic relationship that's built on like white privilege and
Hmm.
using a person of color as like almost an accessory to the life that that person has, just was like really really like struck me, and I was really impressed with their acting in this. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think everything with what's their name, the Mossbacher family is
Mhm.
just really impressive because that's where like the most overt like conversations about like class
Mhm.
come up. This wealthy white family with a entitled daughter who doesn't actually see herself as entitled. She thinks she's really woke,
Mhm.
but still actually benefits from everything she
Yep.
says she's aware of. And of course, Paula calls that out at the end there. Uh, really well done. I would say it was notable to me that Paula at no point's like, let me try and help out Kai. This guy I totally fucked over
Mhm.
with this ill-begotten scheme.
Yep.
Nope. Nope. She had a little selfishness too. And I think that's kind of the thing with this show is almost every character has some kind of flaw or some kind of tick, right? Like
Mhm.
in the case of Jake Lacey's Shane, and Jake Lacey, great performance just because he's
Yeah.
off type being a dick. He's usually not playing that kind of character.
Mhm.
But Shane is kind of right most of the time in terms of his complaints. Just the way he's going about it is terrible, obviously.
Yep.
And Murray Bartlett's Armand is barely competent as the hotel manager, but you still really sympathize with him because of
Yep.
the again the stuff about class coming in. These people in the service industry that are just subjected to making other people feel happy at when all else fails. That is their job,
Mhm.
and they have a resentment towards that, and it doesn't make you feel good, you know,
Oh
when you
no.
see anything that happens, really. Like Rachel, right? Like Alexander Daddario's character. She does not feel fulfilled in her relationship. She clearly is newly married to an entitled rich prick.
And now a
Yet,
murderer.
right. And yet, like her like work play is like, oh well, you fucking write like listicles. Like it's not like there's just some
Mhm.
wrong that needs to be righted here, you know?
Yep.
It's like there's something wrong with everyone one way or the other. And
Right.
I like how hard the show is on all of its characters.
Mhm.
If anyone is like a shining light, it's probably Belinda, Natasha Rothwell's
Oh,
character. Like she's the
100%.
one that
Yeah.
doesn't have any flaws, and yet the show doesn't give her like some big speech. But Rothwell still sells it at the end when she's like, what she's
You
like,
want
I'm
my
all
advice? I'm all out. Yeah, such
Yeah.
a good line, and it's just such a I think like talk about those meta I don't know, messages that come across like how black women I think are used and abused within society, and she just got to the point where she's like, I'm all used up. I can't give any more of myself to these white people who don't actually give a fuck about me. And I thought that was like actually a great way to end it because I think if she had had a speech, it wouldn't have felt as real. And I think that's the other thing is, except for maybe Quinn, I think the arc of most of these people feels really real. Like Rachel's arc, that like made a terrible mistake, wanting to leave her husband on the honeymoon, and then when like push came to shove, she didn't want to give up that lifestyle. She didn't actually want to like be out on her own. She just
Mm,
wanted to like feel like she had more control in the relationship, and she gave in. And like
yeah.
it's I think just true to life. I think um, Steve Zahn, for example, like you see him grappling with the stuff about his dad and then like his own sexuality and like that whole thing I thought played out very realistically where it was just like this like real terror about even the idea of like questioning like the sexuality of yourself or like a man that you idolize in some way and how that affects you I thought was really just like true to form. And Connie Britton, I thought was throwing 100 miles per hour. Her and Murray Bartlett were probably my two favorite performances because I mean Murray gets the most to do as Armand. He's just like ridiculous and all over the place so much of the time. And on a
Tragic
hundred,
in the end,
oh,
It's kind of
totally.
spirals out.
But I mean, just like spirals out in the most entertaining way for an actor. But Connie Britton just was like so measured as I think we called her like a Gwyneth Paltrow type. I guess she's more like tech based than someone like Gwyneth Paltrow, but like the episodes where she plays up her like what was it her like I'm a self-made person I didn't like get where I was because I'm a woman like that sort of stuff I just was like man she just always seems like she nails these sorts of roles and just the casting was great. What did you think about Quinn though? Like I think I've seen some people feeling unsure about the ending with Quinn and how realistic that ending was.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's not that realistic. I do think the show does a good job of making his character much more likable by the end. Because in the beginning, he just sucks. Like, yeah, he might be on the spectrum, but like at the end of the day, like he just didn't have good social skills, even as part of his toxic family. And
Mm.
like when I watched him like drown his iPad, Switch, and phone, I was like, okay, well, you're just an idiot. Like I'm not. I can't feel bad for that. You know.
Well, but you feel bad for him because he's a white male, right? That was
Oh
like
man.
maybe the funniest like frame that Connie Britton's character tried to give throughout the whole thing. I just was like,
Yeah,
holy shit, how out of touch.
I know.
Um, Go on.
But
Sorry, I cut
but
you
yeah,
off.
but by the end, it's like kind of having this epiphany about what you value in life. And yeah, maybe they cut some corners. We only see him get on the canoe and get off the canoe and go to the next dinner and say how happy he is. Like, there's not a whole lot said on it. I guess it's really kind of like a secondary thing. Like, it wasn't like the main
Mm.
focus of the show because it's not directly tied to all the themes. But um, I didn't mind it.
Yeah, but I thought like a character finding like true happiness and disconnecting and learning the culture, being one with the culture, letting themselves be immersed in something was like a nice message and I think people can have that experience when they go on a resort trip like this. I don't know. I feel like this is a show we could do like a very long review on because there's just so many themes that came out. But I guess maybe a good place to wrap this up. I think we both agree season two is going to be probably a different resort, almost certainly a different cast. But I think the premise is good. Um, when you think about the show and you look back, what do you feel like is going to be like the scene, the moment, the thing you're going to remember most?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. Um, yeah, I don't know if there's like a standout like
Moment.
rewatchable scene like that, honestly, because it's a good question. I
I
know it
think it.
won't. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I think it might be that scene where Armand finally dies, right? Because I mean, the
Mm,
visual of him actually pooping into the suitcase is such like a on the nose metaphor, but then it's so tense, like watching them like run around that room and like
yeah.
I feel like that was just really like a perfect ending. And then seeing Shane, who just did this horrible thing, like, oh, I'm sorry, and like you see he's not like really a terrible person, but he's also still a douchebag who just murdered someone. So it's like
Yeah.
perfect encapsulation right there.
Yeah. I will say it's not going to be any scene with Tanya, Jennifer Coolidge. Like, Jennifer Coolidge's performance is good, but I just really didn't like the Tanya character. Just like, it's just so aloof
Mhm.
and like, I don't know, the energy was just weird for me. Didn't really like that one.
Well, what did you think of Greg, her love interest?
Yeah, he was kind of cool just because he's like added halfway through the show. It's like a different energy. Also, like when Molly Shannon shows up as Jake
Yeah.
Lacey's mom for a bit, and I like that. That was nice.
Greg, did you recognize him?
No,
This is gonna be a deep pull. Did you ever see Napoleon Dynamite, Dave?
yeah,
Greg is Uncle Rico from Napoleon
wow,
Dynamite. He threw football over them there mountains back in the day.
damn.
So,
Did you
yeah,
did you recognize Quinn?
he was in Underground Railroad, man.
That's right. Fred
Yeah,
Hetchinger was young Joel Edgerton in the flashback episode.
much different role,
You
and
could say that,
probably
yeah.
an actor to be keeping our eye on.
Yeah,
So,
and
White
clearly
Lotus,
Sydney Sweeney is just adding to her CV. She's actually has a quite impressive young career already.
she's dynamite, man. But let's move on from TV to not to step on your review here, Dave, but a movie that I think you referred to in a tweet as the best video game movie that's ever been made. Free Guy. Tell me why.
It's true. Now it's not an adaptation of any existing video game IP. So to some people that is like a disqualification for the criteria, but in terms of movies based on or about video games, the culture, the phenomenon of gaming, this I think is the best because it's just really well done, quite self-aware and meta, watchable, entertaining. It really is the whole picture to me. And if you're a fan of gaming, if you know gaming culture, you know video games, like the reference points, I think make it even better. Like you can enjoy this if you don't know much about gaming, but if you do, I think that even enriches it.
Mm.
Um, Free Guy is a holdover from Fox that Disney inherited. Was supposed to come out last summer, finally out now, exclusively in theaters, starring Ryan Reynolds. And even though it was made way back in 2019, it's based off a script from like I think 2016. It's very uh, long gestating project, and ended up being directed by Sean Levy. And it's honestly really high concept. What if a non-playable character in a online video game, similar to say Grand Theft Auto Online, what if that character, who normally would be relegated to what he or she is programmed to do, and cannot deviate from that as a non-playable computer character, what if that character self-actualizes for some reason and starts being able to do what it wants? What would happen? And that's essentially what happens with Free Guy, and it's really awesome. I didn't expect there to be some like I think actually quite intriguing like real world plots that then would connect with what's going on in the game as Guy, Ryan Reynolds' character, becomes self-aware and starts doing his thing. But I think it all really comes together in an impressive way. First big movie role for Jodie Comer, who we both adore.
Yeah.
Also a big movie role for Joe Keery from Stranger Things. And they have a relationship as video game developers are trying to get back at the big maniacal developer that kind of like took over their game idea and stuff and is profiting from it. And that ego driven developer is played by Taika Waititi in a really funny role.
Man, he's
So
getting a lot of like small roles recently.
yeah, definitely. I'm just coming off of the Suicide Squad, of course.
Mhm.
And in the game, it's Ryan Reynolds as well as Lil Rel Howery as his best friend. And it just really comes together, I think, in a really fun way. I really like the action, but it's like the kind of like the progression of like how the story goes. It almost makes sense for like a game like leveling up, getting ready to achieve things. I think it all really makes sense. And I'm not going to spoil them, but there's really awesome cameos in this, and in general, like the, IP references. It's almost like you could definitely compare this to Ready Player One, and even more of like as like a cultural level in terms of how the movie works, similar to like Wreck It Ralph,
Hmm.
in the animation side. So I would absolutely recommend it. I was, going in with really no expectations, but I mean, in terms of like watching the hosts become alive, this was way more compelling than say Westworld. I would,
Interesting.
not that I guess that says too much if people know our feelings on Westworld, but similar themes nonetheless. Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's not too serious, right? Like, it's not the funniest Ryan Reynolds. Like, we know how good Ryan Reynolds can be with like self-deprecating mile-a-minute humor. It's not at Deadpool level, like, but it's in that vein in terms of for Reynolds' performance. And even though it's not the funniest thing he's been in of late, it's funny enough. But the action's
Yeah.
good and the plot's good. It's quite riveting, honestly. I really liked it.
So Sean Levy directs this, and he's probably most well known for Night at the Museum
Hmm.
trilogy. I guess there's three or four, maybe there's
Yeah,
four. But
great.
he's more recently Date Night. No, not that. Actually, no, I was thinking of Game Night. So I was gonna say a much better movie, but no, Date Night is not a movie I actually think I know. So I'm looking at this filmography, and I'm like, there's not really much here I'm super impressed with. So to see him get back behind, the camera after what 7 years since his last directed movie, and to make something good, probably a bit of a I don't know, a shocker in a sense, but uh, I really want to see this now. Like this was a movie I was like fine missing beforehand, and now I feel like I really missed out. And I'm going to talk about the movie I chose to see instead, and
Hmm.
certainly enjoyable. But this sounds like a lot more fun than the one I was at. So a
Yeah,
little jealous of your experience this weekend, Dave.
and thankfully it actually kind of overperformed expectations at the box office, making about 28 million, which is obviously a great sign given that Free Guy is a original non-franchise IP. Reynolds has since tweeted and Levy's confirmed that Disney now wants a sequel to this movie. So
Of
that's cool that
course.
they're doubling down again on an inherited film. But I mean, it's nice to see the success, just coming off the Suicide Squad not being that successful. So
Or-
if people, there's good word of mouth. If you want to go, people are going to the movies when they're young. People didn't go to Respect too much because that's a movie intended for older people. But that's to be expected, I guess.
Yeah, and let's talk about Respect. I don't know if this needs to be a super long review, but I went to go see Respect, directed by Liesl Tommy, a South African director with not a lot of credits to his name at this point, but I think after seeing this movie, there's definitely a lot of potential. There's some really interesting choices and shots. This is the Aretha Franklin biopic. Jennifer Hudson plays Aretha Franklin, and Aretha Franklin herself, prior to her passing, said that if biopic was ever made of her, she would want Jennifer Hudson to play her. So definitely very cool to see her in this role. We're getting this just a few months after the season of Genius Aretha Franklin,
Hmm.
starring Cynthia Erivo, wrapped up. And I started watching that, did not finish it quite yet, but um, knew some of the storylines that played out in Respect going in because I had watched a few episodes of that. Aretha Franklin, by any measure, had a amazing life. And I think the fact that her life is so big and there's so many aspects of it that play to why like why some of the more dramatic things happen in her life down the road almost makes it really hard, I think, to do a good biopic of her in a concise way.
Right.
Like this really should have been like a 4 hour movie if you were going to do it right, it almost feels like.
And it's not like the movie's short, it's 2.5 hours. But does this try and do the whole story as opposed to like a specific piece of life?
Yeah, so it ends after her 1972 live. album, which was her most successful album. It was also a gospel album that she recorded at a church that she visited when she was younger. But it tells her whole life story from that point, from childhood up to that point. And it has some flashback moments and stuff like that. But I left the movie feeling like they touched on a lot of different things, and I don't know if they ever really gave any of them enough time. But it seems like the theme that they're trying to get out of Respect was, in order for Aretha Franklin to really like become the artist she was, to truly be the artist she was meant to be, she had to really find herself, and faith and family were the way that she did that. And I think that message is communicated effectively. But like any music biopic that tries to examine the whole life story of artists, and usually artists that they're doing biopics about have very troubled lives in one way or another, or at least have parts of their lives that are troubled. Um, there's a lot of up and down in this. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of her being in an abusive relationship and getting out of an
Mm.
abusive relationships. With Ted White, played by Marlon Wayans, and he's truly despicable. Like he actually got reaction out of people in my theater, guffaws, people snickering, like people being very responsive to him on screen. So in that case, nice to see Marlon Wayans getting a serious role and kind of nailing it. Um, I just feel like the movie was long, and maybe not long for effective reasons. But man, some of the scenes, and probably the scenes you could guess, were fucking dynamite. Like the first time that they write Respect together, she has like 9 albums before she finally writes Respect, right? And these albums are all kind of cookie cutter for the time, boring covers of other songs. And when she finally like goes to the South, is playing with these white guys who are like this funk, recording band, and they start making music, and she's finally taking the lead. It's like everything comes together, and the scene is just really, really great. And I wish that for a person who seems to have been really just a leader, a game changer in so many aspects outside music, that the music scenes weren't the only part I was leaving being like, that was really awesome. And that's, I think,
Mm.
where maybe it falls short for me. But
It honestly sounds a lot like the United States versus Billie Holiday from earlier this year,
hmm,
where like the talking points are almost the same. It's like it's kind of a long-winded biopic that tries to achieve too much, but a lot of the set piece scenes are really effective due to the strength of our central performer. Billie Holiday's case, that was Andra Day. In Respect, of course, it's Jennifer Hudson, who I would say is like just kind of like the default choice for something like this.
right.
Like obviously she won
She
the
got the
Oscar way
pipes.
back for Dreamgirls, but like she's the best of the best for something like this. So it
Hmm.
makes perfect sense. And she is pegged right now as a Best Actress nominee. Of course,
Hmm.
we're pre-award season, but that's the early expectation. So do you think this is a performance that is in the running?
Yeah, I was thinking about this when I left the theater yesterday. I think it's certainly good enough to be nominated. We're in a stacked year, and I was trying to think of what other performances feel almost certain to be nominated next to her. The only one I could definitely think of was Gaga for House of
Gucci.
Gucci, but
Yeah.
there's, if I read
Chastain,
the list,
Isa Tammy Faye is being pegged as well.
that was
Um,
another one that came to mind. There
yeah.
was, but it's just the sort of thing where I think it just depends on how strong the year is, because I don't think this will end up being the best of the year, but I think it's certainly nomination worthy. So I mean, she'll definitely get a Golden Globes nomination for whatever that's worth. So
Yeah.
best musical or comedy, probably.
I'm sure this is gonna come out soon, but people that have seen both and people that really know Aretha Franklin's story, which performance and which product do people like more? Cynthia
Mhm.
Erivo and Genius Aretha, or Jennifer Hudson in Respect?
Yeah,
Wouldn't be surprised if it's more down the middle than people say, because like the Genius shows are not like the most widely celebrated shows, but they're still vehicles for essential performance, just like most biopics are. So
Yeah.
be interesting to
I
see how that goes.
I think like my final word on it is I think this was a good enough biopic where I wouldn't say it was like an injustice to Aretha Franklin anyway, but I think it's just the sort of thing where she was so much larger than life that like it was hard. This is like almost an impossible task to make
Yeah.
a perfect biopic around it. So, admirable job done by all. But Dave, that wasn't the only movie that centered around music that at least I saw this weekend, and that other movie is Coda, which dropped on Apple Plus. Um, were you looking forward to Coda?
I was looking forward to Coda once the news dropped at Sundance 2021 that Coda broke the acquisition record, $25 million buy for Apple TV Plus, breaking the record set just last year with Hulu and Palm Springs. So when you see something like that, and it was like a $7 million difference, is quite the margin of record breaking. It's like, oh wow, people really like Coda, and it did win the uh, dramatic jury and audience awards at Sundance 2021. So there was a really warm reception to it earlier this year. So yeah, with that, I was looking forward to it. And coming on August, a little bit before award season, perhaps a little curious on Apple's part because they clearly dropped the bag on this with awards play in mind. But either way, was looking forward to it, and I did enjoy it. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought this movie was great. I was surprised at how emotional this movie made me, and I think it worked. It surprised me because I think after like watching the first like 25 or 30 minutes, I was like, "Ah, this is okay." Like, I don't really know if I'm gonna get there with this movie. And then by the end, I was totally in and totally captivated and rooting for Ruby to, follow her dreams. I really felt for her situation and for her family situation, and I think they tell so many aspects of the story so expertly. It's just really impressive. Like at first I didn't think I was going to really buy into the family dynamic. I was kind of like, man, this really sucks. It seems like they're really using Ruby in a lot of ways. And they
Mm.
are. It's like a codependent relationship in a lot of ways. Um but I think it's the scene where they catch the parents having sex, right? Miles comes over, they're gonna practice the duet, and they catch the parents having sex, and then the way that the dad and the mom respond and make them talk about it, and after that, I just was like totally in because I was like laughing. I love the dynamic of the family. It felt like such a real like awkward family moment, and I was like, okay,
Mm.
now I'm getting more and more of it. And as the stakes raise, as Ruby's put into this impossible situation of chasing her own dreams or fulfilling her family's expectations of her, it just really all worked for me. And the music choices were just fantastic. So I was just really blown away. Well, what aspects of the movie did you like? You said you enjoyed it.
Uh, yeah. So kind of similarly, like Coda, almost the whole time, it's a little hokey, it's a little cheesy, right? And it
Yeah.
has like familiar aspects, right? It's like the coming of age story, really central on the family. But of course, the key thing here is the specifics, right? What does Coda mean? Child of deaf adults.
Adults.
And we just talked about deaf representation, deaf stories uh, in media just last year with Sound of Metal, which
Great
got
movie.
many plaudits, including Best Picture, Best Actor nominations. And, Sound of Metal, the lead performance, the main focus of the movie, is still Riz Ahmed's character, a hearing person and a character that's becoming deaf. But Paul Raci, notably, got that supporting actor nomination and a lot of love. And he, of course, is a Coda himself. But all the other deaf actors are largely in the periphery because it was a Riz story. But
Mhm.
in this, 75% of the lead actors are deaf performers.
Yeah.
And I mean, notably, you have Marley
Martin.
Maitland, who plays Jackie, the
Oh,
mom,
Maitland, you're right.
the only deaf winner of a acting Oscar in 1986, Best Actress. And I think you're right. Like, even though Amelia Jones is not deaf and her character isn't deaf, but like the family just felt so real and the dynamics are so strong. And because they kept bringing everything back around to the story, focusing on everything with the family, I think that's what makes it work by the end. I'm very similar to you, where it's like I wasn't like being super moved throughout most of it, but once we get to like that performance that Ruby gives with her school chorus,
Yeah.
and like her parents and her brother are taking it all in, even though they can't actually hear the music, like that, I think that's that piece is like really, really great
Yeah.
and moving. And then it goes from there, of course, when we go to the audition and stuff, and they send her off and all that. So it has a nice crescendo
Yeah.
music turn there in terms of how it builds for the viewer.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree. I think that school performance scene coupled with the next scene where the dad asks her to sing what, and he like feels her vocal cords and feels the vibrations, and kind of learning to try to understand this language that he's never going to be able to fully comprehend, and kind of vice versa for her. It's just really moving. And then obviously I think the Berkeley performance where she's also signing both sides now, the Joni Mitchell classic, to her family while she does it, is just like absolute knockout home run. Closing or final scene, just really, really impressive for the way that they did it. And I thought Amelia Jones was
Mhm.
really, really great in this. I didn't really love um, Ferdia Walsh Pilo as Miles. Something about him just didn't his performance didn't totally hit for me, but I thought Amelia was great. And
Yeah, yeah, I wasn't too familiar with her. She's in the ensemble of the Netflix show Lock and Key, which is like a comic adaptation, but she was just cast in a New Yorker story adaptation to star alongside Nicholas Braun. So
hmm,
perhaps Amelia Jones will quickly become in hot demand. She is only 19. But yeah, she's really good. I mean, she has to carry the whole film,
yeah,
especially because the other her main co-stars don't speak. So really she carries most of the lines.
yeah. Just if you have Apple Plus, and I think you want to take in a movie that I think pays a lot of respect to a community that seems to be becoming more visible, especially in media. Definitely worth your time, and it hits emotionally by the end, so you'll get your money's worth
Mhm.
for it.
Yeah, and just looking into it, this is actually a remake of a 2014 French film, La Famille Bélier, but notably, the parents in that were not deaf.
Hmm.
So Coda seems to be the positive redux in that regard. So curious to see how this movie is received moving forward and whether it becomes an awards thing when Apple does a campaign in the fall, because they obviously would like it too, and I think it would be just no question. It's a heartwarming movie. I feel like more people see it, the more people will talk about it because it's like one of those uplifting movies.
Yeah, I agree. I've been telling a lot of people to watch if they have Apple Plus, so definitely, definitely worth the time. Dave, we're gonna wrap up there. We got through it all. What do we got next week? Donda.
Donda, unlikely. We do have Lord's highly anticipated third album, Solar Power, coming out, as well as Nicole Kidman's next show on Hulu, Nine Perfect Strangers, and also a highly anticipated film starring Adam Driver called Annette, which will be coming to Amazon Prime this end of this week after having a brief theater run. So we'll be talking about those soon, and of course we'll be posting our Anderson Pack album rankings next week in anticipation of Silk Sonic's collaboration with Bruno Mars. So lots of stuff coming up.
Yeah. And we're gonna have some nostalgia rankings. So hit that subscribe on youtube.com/nostalgia pod, and follow us on Twitter at nostalgia pod. We had a member of Abstract Mind State checking out our review. So if it's good enough for him, you should be checking it out too.
Facts.
We'll catch you all on the flip side.